Russell Wilson continues cooking turnovers as the Seahawks drop 2 straight games. UW opens their odd COVID season with a win against Oregon State, and Ken Griffey Jr., the kid, joins the Sounders ownership group. Let's take it around the Sound. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Around the Sound, episode 19. We just saw the Seahawks drop their second straight game, take their second straight loss, third loss in their last 4 games to the Rams, and man, they looked bad. Russell especially looked really bad this past weekend. Looked like a really average team with some major flaws, some major problems that's keeping them from kind of drifting out of that Super Bowl contender conversation. There's certainly other teams around the NFL that all have flaws, but within that Super Bowl contender conversation, they seem to be able to get over those flaws or have the potential to get over those flaws. The Seahawks, Russell Wilson, and the gang drifting slowly out of that conversation. We'll get to all of that and more in this episode of Around the Sound, but before we do any of that, I want to make sure that you all are following me on Twitter at the Peyton Thomas and the podcast on Instagram at Around the Sound Seattle. Don't miss a beat. Of course, we have new episodes of Around the Sound every Wednesday and Saturday. You can watch every episode of Around the Sound on YouTube at PTOM Media. That's PTHOM space media. You can be one of those people out there behind the camera, or you can listen to Around the Sound wherever you like to get your podcast. All right. Well, Russell Wilson is 0-2 since trademarking Let Russ Cook. Maybe you shouldn't have trademarked Let Russ Cook. Maybe you shouldn't have acknowledged it in the media. He was avoiding it partially for a little while. He trademarks it. He finally accepts it. He wants to start selling cooking utensils and T-shirts and all kinds of apparel, and Russ is 0-2 since then. The Arizona Cardinals, this is kind of a side note, a tangent, but the Arizona Cardinals also won against the Bills in a really wild game this weekend. That game was going on simultaneously at the same time as the Seahawks game. DeAndre Hopkins, it was a Hail Mary. The Arizona Cardinals won on a Hail Mary. Kyler Murray snaps the ball, last play of the game, somehow escapes pressure, is around midfield, hucks it up. Just a prayer for DeAndre Hopkins. And DeAndre Hopkins, the reason that Arizona traded virtually nothing, I mean a lot, for DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best receivers in the league who Houston let go for way too little in return. Great trade for the Arizona Cardinals before the season, but DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best receivers in the NFL, goes up and essentially mosses like 3 different defenders in the end zone. The Bills have a great secondary and a great defense altogether, and the Bills had Arizona right where they wanted them, somehow gave up this Hail Mary play. DeAndre Hopkins, if you haven't not seen the DeAndre Hopkins catch from this past weekend, go look it up. It's on YouTube. It's all over the media. It's everywhere. A fantastic catch. Like one of the greatest catches I've seen, not just this year, but in a really long time. Straight up out jumps 3 defenders, gets his hands up there and just snags the football and takes the win for the Cardinals. A crazy game, crazy scenes down there in Arizona after the win. Congratulations to Arizona for that crazy win, but not great if you're a Seahawks fan. Not great for the Seahawks considering that they drop to 3rd in the NFC West after the Cardinals win that game. So Thursday's game for the Seahawks against Arizona, they're at home against Arizona, that's a must-win game. If you lose that game against Arizona, Arizona is now in the driver's seat for the NFC West, and they also will have the tiebreaker if somehow the Seahawks do catch Arizona late in the season. If the Seahawks win this game against Arizona, the tiebreaker is a toss-up because the head-to-head record is 1-1, and then that tiebreaker goes to a toss-up. It depends how the results finish up late in the season to determine who would win that tiebreaker. But if Seattle does win this game, they would also jump solely back into the lead in the NFC West, at least until the Rams play on Sunday. I believe they're on Sunday. I don't think they're the Monday night game. So let's talk about this Rams game this past Sunday, however. Russ was bad. 22 for 37, 248 yards, and most importantly, no touchdowns. He also had a couple interceptions, especially that first interception. That first interception is one of the worst throws I think I've seen Russell Wilson make in his entire career. Even when Russell Wilson was young, when he was a rookie, he came into the league, the number one thing that really set Russell Wilson apart from other quarterbacks that struggled, I don't know if I want to lump RG3 into that category, but I'm definitely going to lump Colin Kaepernick into that category, and there's plenty of other mobile quarterbacks that followed the Russell Wilson, the mobile quarterback model, that haven't found as much success as Russell Wilson. And on paper, if you don't look at the statistics and you just look at their build, you look at these small quarterbacks that are like 5'11", 5'11 to 6'2", that sort of range, these quarterbacks that can move, they can use their feet, they can operate outside of the pocket. Well, what really set Russell Wilson apart from that group. And what made him different, the reason that he had so much more success and long-term success than those quarterbacks was his decision-making process. When Russ would operate outside of the pocket, he remained extremely calm. He was able to completely survey the field, understand where the defense was, and did not make stupid throws that easily got picked off when he panicked outside the pocket. And most importantly, if the defense opened the red carpet, parted the Red Sea, and gave Russell Wilson an opportunity to use his legs and beat them on the ground, Russell Wilson would not hesitate to use his legs, pick up first downs, pick up big chunks of yardage, and then avoid the hit to avoid injury. And Russell Wilson still avoids hits to avoid injury. He was a minor league baseball player. He knows how to slide. There are some quarterbacks like Joe Flacco who are still in the NFL somehow that don't know how to slide. There's a hilarious montage somewhere on YouTube of Joe Flacco attempting to slide throughout his career, and it's terrible. Clearly that guy never played baseball growing up. But back to my point, Russell Wilson, on that first interception, everything wrong. He slid out of the pocket, was looking comfortable. The Rams were playing zone, which normally Russell Wilson isn't able to run on zone as easily as he's able to run on a man defense, because on a man defense, everybody that's in that secondary is assigned to a receiver, and most defenders are down the field. When in zone, some of those defenders are in short zones and staying up, watching the quarterback and watching the receivers to make sure there's no short plays that turn into long plays because of run after the catch or quarterback scrambles. Well, the Rams were playing zone, but they were playing really far off Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson slid to his right after the ball was snapped and had a lot of space to run. The Rams were playing deep. They easily could have picked up the first down. I know it was about 10 yards to the first down sticks, and Russell Wilson could have picked that up, easily slid. That's actually what I expected him to do. But instead, you see Russell Wilson break every cardinal rule when you're a quarterback. When you're outside the pocket, number one, you can't panic and throw. And Russell Wilson panicked and threw the ball instead of just running and picking up some yardage. That was problem number one. Problem number two is he threw from the right side outside the pocket to the left side. And since he threw from the right side to the left side and Russell Wilson's a right-handed quarterback, it means he's throwing across his body to the opposite side of the field. Two more cardinal rules as a quarterback broken. You don't usually want to throw across your body, and you don't usually want to throw across the field. If you scramble right, throwing left, that can usually be a dangerous throw. There are some exceptions if wide receivers are wide open, but a lot of time that when you're throwing across your body and you're throwing across the field at great distances, the ball's going to have to be in the air a long time, and there's a lot of chances that defenders can jump in front of those passes and pick it off. And the last thing he did was completely miss the safety. He was looking for Will Dissly, I believe, in the end zone, sort of towards the back left pylon. There was a defender that undercut the route. It was the Rams' second corner, whoever plays opposite of Jalen Ramsey. He had 2 interceptions in the game against Seattle this past Sunday. Undercut the route. He was there the whole time. Russell Wilson completely missed him, which is really uncharacteristic of Russell Wilson. But that play, that throw, is a sequence of I could see the gears turning in Russell's head sort of before he threw that ball. And I kind of said to myself as he slid out of the pocket, it was yet another time that Russell Wilson looked comfortable sliding out of the pocket. If he saw somebody open, he was going to chuck it downfield. But if he saw nobody open, he's not going to hesitate. He's going to use his legs on the ground to pick up that first down. And the Seahawks are going to be okay and score on this possession. But it was really uncharacteristic, and I have not seen Russell Wilson make a mental mistake, a throwing mistake, quite like that. It was a combination of all of these bad quarterback characteristics, everything that you see out of mediocre quarterbacks in the NFL, young quarterbacks in the NFL that don't understand how to read NFL defenses. Everything, all the symptoms you see out of those quarterbacks is exactly what I saw out of Russell Wilson on that play, and that's not something that you are used to seeing at all, especially this late in Russell Wilson's career as he's a veteran, but even when Russell Wilson was early in his career as a rookie, second-year, third-year player. Russell Wilson has now had 8 interceptions in his last 3 games. Those are crazy numbers. 8 interceptions in his last 3 games. He's looking like Jameis Winston. He really looks like Jameis Winston. And the Seahawks as a whole actually have looked a little bit like last year's Buccaneers, where Jameis Winston would just toss the ball all the way around the yard. They would not run the ball very often, and it resulted in a few touchdowns, and the Bucs won some games last year, but it was a lot of shootouts. It was a lot of interceptions. Jameis Winston joined the 30-30 club last year, I believe, with 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions, which is something that is crazy for any quarterback. You have to be a crazy, hyperactive passing team with a quarterback that doesn't know how to take care of the football. That's kind of what the Seahawks offense especially has looked like these last few weeks. And The number one reason is because, and I'll talk about this later in the episode, is because the Seahawks don't have a run game right now without Chris Carson, without Carlos Hyde, which means that the Seahawks have to ship to a hyper-passing, high-octane, chucking the ball around the yard mentality, which Russell Wilson has seen. All the evidence that we have when the Seahawks shift that mentality is sometimes that's when Russell gives the ball away and isn't as careful with the football. There's more turnovers when the Seahawks adapt and change to that sort of style. Not just in a 2-minute drill. You don't see that too often with Russell Wilson, but in long periods of time over the course of games. Because of this game, I got to say it. I've talked about it a lot on Around the Sound since the Seahawks have started their season. I think Russell Wilson has officially lost the MVP vote in this game. Now, it doesn't mean he can't get it back. Now, he's still in the conversation, but Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, well, nobody in the NFL in 2020 has really been lighting it up and looks like a lock as that MVP winner. Now, Russell Wilson seemed like a lock through 5 weeks, but since then has really dropped off. There's nobody in that conversation that's really a lock for MVP yet. Rodgers and Mahomes have been plenty consistent. Lamar has certainly dropped off. The Ravens took a terrible loss to the Patriots this past weekend, but nobody's taking that favorite. Nobody's really in that conversation as the sole person that everybody agrees is probably going to be the MVP at the end of the year. Russell Wilson is certainly not the favorite anymore. He's really thrown it away with all of those turnovers. Turnovers is the one thing that really hurts your case for MVP. With all the turnovers, some of the bad decision-making, Russell Wilson certainly throwing himself right out of the MVP conversation. Doesn't mean he can't get it back. We see a comeback, a second-half resurgence from Russell Wilson. Certainly can be back in that conversation. But in my point of view, a lot of what the media, the national media, are saying, people that actually vote on the MVP award at the end of the season, it really seems like Russell Wilson is trying to choke it away. Metcalf, DK Metcalf versus Jalen Ramsey. It was one of my keys to the game on last week's episode of Around the Sound, and Metcalf was blanketed. Jalen Ramsey seemed to have Metcalf's number all game, and it's really odd because I didn't expect that. You didn't see much trash talk out of DK, but I mean, Ramsey kind of had all the bragging rights for that game. I'm not sure what DK could have said. Russell Wilson just did not look DK Metcalf's way for a large portion of that game. And even when he did, I think DK finished with like 2 catches on 3 or 4 targets. DK Metcalf didn't really look like he was super lethal anytime. There was one touchdown that he could have maybe had that Russell Wilson just overcooked that pass by a little bit. That was in the second half, but it was a weird combination between Russ not being on his game, but I think DK not really being on his game or Jalen Ramsey just playing him straight up. It was a weird combination of those two just not on their day that resulted in Ramsey and the Rams secondary dominance of that partnership between Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf. And the Rams secondary really didn't give up much yards to Tyler Lockett either. He had something like 66 yards on a couple catches. Really good job by the Rams secondary. Huge credit go out to the Rams secondary, who have played well all year. This is the first time I've really paid attention to the Rams secondary, and they are a good, solid group. Colin Cowherd said on his show, I don't know if it was early this week. It had to be early this week. It was probably on Monday. Talked about just how screwed the Seahawks are if teams start guarding DK. He feels like Russell is kind of the life preserver for the Seahawks organization, and without him, they wouldn't win a single game. It's interesting. I mean, the Seahawks are 1-3 against teams with positive winning records. Really concerning statistic there. The Seahawks going and playing Arizona, a team within their division, a team with a positive record. It just stresses. We'll get to the preview of that game later, but it just stresses the importance of that game. Chris Carson should be back on Thursday, and that changes the landscape of this offense. We saw the Seahawks offense stall before the second half yet again, which has been sort of a trend in the last few Seahawks losses. The Seahawks offense has been able to keep pace with all the points the defense were giving up to a single point, and then I don't know what happened, but it seemed like a switch flipped in the last few Seahawks games at some point in the second quarter where the offense went from being really effective and Russ was slicing through the defense between then the rest of the game, the Seahawks offense not looking the same, not being able to move the ball. And I think really what it comes down to is having a lack of running game. When you can establish the running game, and I've talked about it before here on Around the Sound, Chris Carson, a great running back, when he can establish the run game for the Seahawks, then it opens up all kinds of opportunities for Russell Wilson using his own legs, Russell Wilson in the play-action passing game, which opens up more opportunities for DK Metcalf, for Tyler Lockett, for David Moore, for Freddie Swain, who actually had a couple good grabs in this pass game against the Rams. But you open up opportunities for those guys by establishing the run game. Those guys are going to be open for I don't know, a few drives at the beginning of a game. But if the defense can count on the fact that you have no run game, they can sit back, they can drop 8 people into coverage and play deep zones, they can double team DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett without having to worry about a running back. When defenses are able to do that, it gets really hard for Russell Wilson to continue to make plays in the passing game. The running game is what makes that work. The running game is the oil that continues this machine running for 4 quarters. That machine can run for a little while off Russell Wilson's magical ability and the great ability of Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. After a while, you do need a running game to supplement that, and that's something the Seahawks have certainly missed without Chris Carson these last 3 weeks, and certainly missed without Carlos Hyde, the backup running back, as well. Ethan Posic's injury, we talked about it on Around the Sound when in our preview of this game. We were a little bit concerned that Posic being out would allow Aaron Donald to take advantage of a backup center in there and cause harm to Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was sacked 6 times in this game and hit plenty, but I did not feel like Kyle Fuller was a liability or the only liability on that offensive line, and I don't feel like Aaron Donald was allowed to dominate the trenches in the way that he has in the past. Kyle Fuller's bad moment didn't really come in the blocking game. It came with the bad snap. The Seahawks' 3rd turnover. I think it was the 3rd turnover. He snapped it low to Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson couldn't pick up the ball, and the Rams picked up the fumble. That was a huge turning point in the game. It almost felt like the dagger for the Seahawks because you knew the Rams were going to be able to probably score at least 3 points on that drive and put the game sort of out of reach for the Seahawks offense. That was a really, really rough turnover for Kyle Fuller. He also picked up an injury in that game, so it'll be interesting to see if Posic will be back and ready for the game on Thursday against Arizona. If he's not, you're going to have somebody in there, probably a guard or a tackle, slide over into that center position and giving Russell Wilson snaps. It'll be interesting to see how that works out, how that dynamic kind of changes if you have somebody like Kyle Fuller who's not used to snapping the ball. You have those bad snaps and those fumbles moments like that. Let's talk about the defense because I don't think the defense looked terrible. I don't think it was a step in the right direction, if you could say that. They looked bad, but not as bad as they have. I think that it was a step up from Buffalo, but could you really take a step down from where this defense was in Buffalo? Damon Snacks Harrison was upgraded and active for this game. Jamal Adams actually played really well in this game and forced a strip sack off of Jared Goff. Carlos Dunlap was also a part of this game before getting injured, but it was the worst the run defense had looked. I thought the pass defense was certainly there and was a factor in probably stepped up from where they were at the Buffalo game because Buffalo just did not run the ball whatsoever and just attacked the pass defense. The Rams came in with a different mentality that actually surprised me. I had said on Around the Sound that I had expected them to pass the ball a little bit more than their offense was used to and put it a little bit more on the shoulders of Jared Goff because the Seahawks pass defense had been so poor. Well, it was a little bit surprising to me, but I don't think the Rams were willing to do that and give Jared Goff that much responsibility. They leaned heavily on those workhorses they have, Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson, and Cam Akers, that kind of 3-headed monster that the Rams have in the backfield. All 3 of those guys got carries during the game and were very effective. The Seahawks run defense, who had been average to above average all year. I mean, teams moved away from the run game like we saw in Buffalo very often because it was so easy to pick apart the Seahawks defense. In the pass game, they decided to stop running, but the Rams continued running throughout the game, and it was effective for them throughout the game. The Seahawks run defense, that front 7, looked a little bit small. We're getting bullied at the line just a little bit more than we had seen all year. It was interesting, but the defense, the pass defense, like I said, held the Rams passing offense, but they held them to mediocre numbers, but how much of that is on Jared Goff just not having a very good season where the Rams have to rely on the run game to really get things going for their offense? The defense in this game gave the offense a small chance, but after the offense had sort of flipped that switch and stopped rolling in the second half, it was going to be difficult for the Seahawks to try to overcome that deficit. But credit to the defense for trying to keep the offense in that game. A special shout out to the special teams and to Jason Myers for hitting a 61-yard field goal before the half. The Seahawks offense, they had already flipped that switch, and Russell Wilson threw like 3 straight incomplete passes trying to move the ball at least a little bit closer for Jason Myers. Could not move the ball even closer for a field goal at the end of the half at all, which means Jason Myers had to come out right at the end of the half for a 61-yard field goal, and he hit it. He needed every bit of it, but he hit it. A great kick, a great moment for Jason Myers, who has now hit like 21 straight kicks or something. He's been fantastic all year. That 61-yarder is a franchise record. The old record was set in 2003. It was 58 yards. Pete Carroll, after the game, said he kind of defended his players and stayed on a positive tone. Pete Carroll always staying positive. He said he thinks they can turn around, but there's a lot of work ahead. But I do want to highlight sort of one play, one moment in this game that really shocked me in the way that Pete Carroll handled it. And it was that 4th and 1 play. It was some point in the third quarter. Offense got into a 4th and 1 situation, and Pete Carroll decided to punt out of it. I think the Seahawks were across midfield, and I'm really surprised. I mean, going into this year, there was a lot of talk about Pete Carroll wanting to be more aggressive and building your team based around the offense, putting more on Russell Wilson's shoulders. And I got to say, for a big part of the season, and even in this game, the play calling and all of the decisions have been on relying on Russell Wilson playing on a good game and relying on your offense to continue scoring points. Essentially, trusting your offense more than you trust your defense. And when you get put in a situation like 4th and 1, to be intellectually consistent with that philosophy of trusting your offense more than you're trusting your defense, you have to go for it every time. And I know Chris Carson was out. I know Carlos Hyde was out, but maybe you don't have to run the ball. Or maybe if you do run the ball, you run it with Russell Wilson and a QB sneak up the middle. If the offensive line gets a push, that's a first down every time. Or you do a little quick pass, maybe a jet pass to Tyler Lockett. You can get creative with the playbook there on 4th and 1 and try some different things that the defense may not be ready for. But I definitely think that Pete Carroll should have tried at least something to stop the Rams. The offense needed to stay on the field there for the Seahawks to have a chance in that game. The Seahawks decide to run the offense out there and try to get the Rams to jump, try to get a offsides penalty, sort of a bailout on 4th and 1. The Rams hold, don't jump offside. Seahawks get a delay of game penalty and then therefore punt on 4th and 6. So on Thursday, looking ahead at our preview, like I said, Chris Carson should be back for that game against the Arizona Cardinals. If he's back and at 100% full health, which I don't know what that percentage threshold is for Chris Carson, but if he's close or looking 100% in that game, the offense has got to be back on track, and the offense has got to use that running game. They've got to establish the running game and use that running game to regain Russell Wilson's momentum and his confidence throwing the football. You saw in the second half of the Rams game, after Russell Wilson had tossed 2 of those interceptions, thrown all of those turnovers in the last 3 weeks, you saw him stop looking downfield. You saw Russell Wilson a little bit shy, a little bit gun shy to throw the ball down the field, risking another turnover. Great opportunity to turn it around, to let Russ cook yet again, to let Russ unleash that big cannon arm with those sky balls to Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Those guys are not going to be open unless you can establish the run game with Chris Carson and make the Cardinals respect Chris Carson in the run game, send more people at the line, bring a little bit more pressure towards the running back in order to open up opportunities in the passing game. Like I said at the head of this episode, Seahawks are now sitting 3rd in the NFC West. They are tied on record with the Rams and the Cardinals, but have lost the tiebreaker to both of those teams. The Cardinals sit atop the NFC West right now as it stands, I believe anyway. Going to be a huge game. The Seahawks lose this one. The Cardinals put in the driver's seat for the NFC West. The Seahawks are going to be playing catch-up the next few weeks to finish out the season. If the Seahawks still want the first seed, want a chance at the bye, and especially want a chance at the division, it's must-win time. You've already taken those 3 losses. First seeds, number 1 seeds at the end of the year, usually are 13-3, sometimes are 12-4. Occasionally they're a little better than 13-3, but 13-3 is sort of that goal to aim for. With the 3 losses in the last 4 weeks, the Seahawks are now sitting at a record of 6-3. It's go time. It's must-win time for the Seahawks offense. It's going to be really interesting if you want to start avoiding those NFC West tiebreakers. You have to start winning this game, especially on Thursday night against Arizona. The defense for the other side of the ball for the Seahawks, the main thing, their main goal needs to be getting pressure on Kyler Murray. The reason the Seahawks took that loss down in Arizona a few weeks ago is on 40-something dropbacks for Kyler Murray, there was exactly 1 QB pressure, exactly 1 QB hit, I believe, but not a single sack the whole game. And Kyler Murray essentially had a clean pocket to work with the whole game. When you have a quarterback who is playing well, and Kyler Murray has been playing pretty well this year, somebody who's as shifty as he is, playing as well as he is, and has receivers, weapons like DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, Isabella, on the other side, you're going to get torched, and that's why we saw the Seahawks lose that game. The defense has to get more than one pressure. They have to get in there and disrupt the pocket, get a few sacks, force Arizona into those second and long and especially third and long situations where you can hopefully get off the field. DK Metcalf needs to be looking for a bounce-back game Thursday night against Arizona. Last time out in Arizona, Tyler Lockett had that massive 50-point fantasy game with something like 15 grabs, 3 touchdowns, and a massive amount of yardage. He torched Arizona last time, so the Arizona Cardinals defense are probably going to be doubling him a majority of the time, especially with DK Metcalf coming off a cold week. DK Metcalf's most likely going to have some opportunities this game to showcase his skills. DK Metcalf's got to have a bounce-back game. Russell's got to get the ball there. That partnership needs to be reestablished if the Seahawks want that quick turnaround. Like I said, quick turnaround, though. 4 days after that loss to the Rams, Seahawks need to get that momentum back, need to turn it around on Thursday night. Seattle, like I said earlier in the episode, 1-3 against winning teams, a very, very concerning stat there. We'll see what happens on Thursday night. We'll be back here on Around the Sound on Saturday to talk about what happened and preview the next game for the Seahawks. But for now, we'll have to wait and see what happens because I want to shift over and talk about UW. UW, not the last team to play a college football game in 2020. Utah won that terrible COVID lottery by having both their first 2 Pac-12 games suspended. So it was great to see some local college football this past weekend. UW takes the victory over Oregon State, who has been sort of a basement dweller in the Pac-12 North, at least the past few years. But the biggest question going into training camp, we talked about it in the Husky preview, who gets the start? It was a four-person race for the quarterback starting position, and Jimmy Lake wasn't letting any media in. He wasn't providing any clues. Nobody had any idea who was going to line up under center for the Washington Huskies, and it was a surprise. I expected it to be the grad student Thompson or somebody a little bit older, maybe Sermon. We got the freshman. We got Dylan Morris, who gets the start. The freshman beat out the older, more experienced guys, including the transfer, to get the start. Congratulations to him for winning that quarterback battle, assuming he gets the start going forward. And it took a little bit for him to get settled in. You could tell he was a freshman. You could tell there was some nerves. But especially in that third quarter, late third quarter, you could start to see the playbook begin to open up. You saw Jimmy Lake and the offensive coordinator trust Dylan Morris just a little bit more, allowing him to throw the ball, sort of those medium range passes for the first 3 quarters of play or up until that drive. It was mostly short passing. It was shovel passes. Well, it wasn't really shovel passes. It was screen passes. It was short passing, play action, opportunities where you weren't really putting your quarterback in a place of danger. You weren't really forcing him to make some fantastic throws. Playbook started beginning to open up for him later in the game. That's great things to see for your freshman quarterback. The coaching staff getting a little bit more trust in that young quarterback. But I do want to say Oregon State is not a great team, but it was a very gritty game. It was a close, hard-fought game for the Huskies, much closer than they certainly wanted it to be. And UW shot themselves in the foot several times over the course of the night. And the most important one, which got them off on the wrong foot in the first quarter, was that snap, that punt snap over the head and returned for a touchdown. It was an odd play. The offense gets stopped on UW's opening drive. The long snapper snaps it over the punter's head. The punter runs back, tries to desperately grab it and punt it away. It gets blocked. A bunch of people miss the ball. Oregon State ends up with a return touchdown off of the fumble, which puts the Huskies offense right back onto the field, down 7-0. That was a terrible play. That was an odd play that certainly got the team back or down onto the wrong foot. But I got to say, the reaction from the Huskies team to then score 17 unanswered points after that and take a 17-7 lead against this team certainly looked good, certainly one of the positive parts out of this game. And how about Sean McGrew, the sort of change of pace back? He's a little guy, 5'7". He looks a little bit like Darren Sproles back there. I think he scored the first touchdown for the Huskies. He's shifty, he's hard to bring down, and he's one of the few in that Huskies backfield that adds to that backfield room, if you will, where all of the running backs get several carries throughout the game, but they're not relying on one workhorse there in that backfield. Jimmy Lake is certainly doing plenty of rotation. There's a village back there in UW's backfield, and it looks pretty serviceable, assuming that the offensive line, that blocking that scheme, stays strong. One thing I did pick up on that I did see throughout the game that was really interesting that I didn't really expect, I expected sort of a Chris Peterson style of play, which isn't quite pro style, but isn't quite spread style. He kind of played a hybrid where you can stretch tight ends out sometimes. You can use them in different ways. You put the quarterback in shotgun a lot. This Jimmy Lake Huskies team, they have said that they want to be a running team, but I did not expect so many I formations, so much pro style. It was a lot of line up the big guys, line up 2 tight ends, 1 fullback, and a running back in the backfield, and run it straight up the gut. Assume that your big guys up front are going to beat their big guys up front. It was interesting to see Jimmy Lake's offense come out and play the whole game essentially in that pro style, in that I formation, and try to bully Oregon State's smaller defense and win the battle in the trenches. The most concerning thing is when Oregon State started to come back in that game. Now, I do want to say UW could not stop the run, especially for a massive portion of that second and third quarter. UW could not stop the run. Joe Tryon's out. You had a few opt-outs in that front seven. We talked about it in the preview. The front seven showed a pass rush ability, got a few sacks on Gebbia. I think Gebbia was the name of the Oregon State quarterback. They showed some pass rush ability, the Huskies front seven did, but it was really concerning to watch them attempt to stop the run. Oregon State's offensive line seemed to have their way with the Huskies guys in the trenches there, and the Oregon State running back had a big day as well. People talk about the special teams, the long snapper, a little bit about the wide receiver drops, which we'll get to in a little bit, or about Dylan Morris's limited playbook. The most concerning thing to me that seems like it's the hardest to fix is stopping the run. Getting bullied at the line, you earn that. You earn the right to bully other teams at the line. In the gym, in the offseason, at the training table, bulking your guys up in muscle and in mass and pancaking the guy sitting across from you at the line of scrimmage. That's really concerning to watch the Washington Huskies get bullied at the line like that and have an inability to stop the run. Talking about Dylan Morris's playbook, though, the Huskies did not make him take very many risks. They started opening the playbook up in the third quarter, but he did finish 14 for 24, 141 yards. That's not really his fault that the completion percentage was so poor. We'll get to the wide receivers in a second. A great first building block for Morris. I would expect him to start the rest of the year if he's able to stay consistent, if he's able to avoid turnovers, take care of the football. That's what Jimmy Lake wants to do. He wants to be a running team. He wants to slow the game down. He wants to have these long-winded 13, 15 play drives that end in a 2-yard rushing touchdown where it never looked in the beyond reasonable doubt that the Seahawks were, or that the Huskies, wow, I am all over the place here today, but that the Huskies would give up the football. It looked very consistent. It looked very organized, and it's the way that Jimmy Lake wants to organize his teams. Let's talk about the wide receivers. When Dylan Morris was told to throw the ball, and when he did put the ball on the money, not all the throws were right where they should have been, right on the numbers. But I do want to say most of them were, and there were several times during the game where I would expect a lot of these wide receivers to make the catch, and there was several drops in this game from all kinds of wide receivers. It was not just one guy. This wide receiver room in the Huskies locker room is wide open. There's a lot of guys looking to make their name out there, trying to be the next Jermaine Kearse. There's not a bunch of huge recruits in there. A lot of guys looking to make an impact in getting more snaps, and the Huskies are going to continue to be a running team, but you need those wide receivers to play a big part. You need them to catch the football. They certainly let Morris down there on a few of those drives with their crucial drops. I do want to say after the game in the press conference, Jimmy Lake wore a hat that said "Run the damn ball" to the press conference. That's awesome. At least we're clear and we're good to know where we stand with the Huskies offense. All right, let's talk about the kid joining the big ownership group in the Sounders that includes plenty of celebrities. More and more MLS clubs have gone after big-name owners. The Sounders already have Macklemore. They have Russell Wilson. They're now adding Ken Griffey Jr. But other teams across the league, the Philadelphia Union, have Kevin Durant owning part of their team. I know James Harden owns part of the Houston Dynamo down there in Texas. So Ken Griffey Jr., not the first to do it, but certainly a big owner that's joining the Sounders ownership group. The kid has appeared at Sounders games every so often. He's done the scarves up before matches. I think he did it before the 2019 MLS Cup game. I was at that game. I do remember him kind of wandering down around the field, and I know he was there just hanging out with Macklemore and some of the other guys that were hanging around on the field at the 2019 MLS Cup. According to Ken Griffey Jr., he's always loved the team and, of course, feels a connection to the area. His wife has been a diehard soccer fan who grew up playing the sport, so it seems natural that he supports the Sounders and would become a part owner. So congratulations to the Griffey family for joining the Sounders family. It's a pretty cool story there, seeing sort of the Mariners history, a Mariners icon, a regional icon, a sports icon, joining the Sounders family, extending that ownership group. All right, well, there you have it. A good, solid episode of Around the Sound where we touched on a little bit of soccer that includes a baseball player. We talked about plenty of football, wrapping up those two games that we saw from the weekend, Seahawks-Rams on Sunday, and before that, Washington against Oregon State on Saturday night. That was a late kickoff, by the way. 8 p.m. Pacific time. No wonder nobody in the Midwest or the East Coast watches Pac-12 games. That's not Pac-12 after dark. That seems plenty like Pac-12 before breakfast. That game was really, really late. But anyway, we'll be back here on Around the Sound on Saturday. We'll wrap up what happened in Seahawks-Cardinals. It'll be interesting to see how the Seahawks respond after that Rams game. We'll have plenty to talk about in the upcoming episodes of Around the Sound as the news cycle keeps on turning. So stay safe, and thanks for listening.